Hello friends, I am Prashant. You're watching Educational Stuff YouTube channel. Today we'll be having a discussion on the second article which was published in the Hindu newspaper. Today is 30th May 2020. This is the second article. If you want to see the first article, you can just see on the eye icon which is displayed on the screen right now. This was written by Harsh Mandar, a human rights worker. This article is based on the civilization introspection. The traumatic months of the national lockdown lay bare many troubling truths about the profound estrangement of people of a privilege from working poor. They reveal a society in which the privileged are extraordinarily comfortable with inequalities and wanting in elementary empathy and solidarity. They confirm the veneer and modernity and the progressive egalitarian values of constitutional remain, in the prophetic words of Baba Sahib Ambedkar, no deeper than a coat of paint. An exile of poor. In the book by name Looking Away, Inequality, Prejudice and Indifference in New Delhi, the author described the Indian rich and middle class to be among the most uncaring in the world, mired still in the cruelties of caste and class, with a singular capacity to look at the injustice and suffering and run their faces away. The author writes the exile of the poor from our conscience and our cautiousness. The lockdown disclosed precisely how absolute and unforgiving is the exile. For any young person growing in the middle class homes, the poor are visible at every turn, but only in their instrumentality as people who exist to service our every need. They never know them as classmates, as colleagues or competitors at the work, or as friends in the playgrounds or cinema theaters. When the COVID-19 infection hit us, we saw the working poor suddenly as dangerous potential spreaders. We wanted them suddenly at bay. We ignored that it was not the poor who endangered us, but we who endangered the poor when they came into contact with us. After all, it was the people who could afford flight tickets who brought the novel coronavirus in India. We welcomed the strategy of lockdown, possibly the harshest and the largest in the world, with the smallest relief package. We felt safe, locked our homes, despite deprived in domestic help. We were conceived, but adjusted willingly for our own safety. We adjusted also to the working from home, secure that our salaries are savings without tied to us. With running water on a tap, we washed our hands regularly. We were troubled because our health insurance would pay for treatment in expensive private hospitals. We grappled with bedrooms and occasional depressions, but it was a time also to rebuild our bonds with our families. We were indifferent that the lockdown fell like a mentor on the lives of millions of working poor. They had fully functional lives, mostly without state support. After possible some years in poorly resourced schools, they traveled far to escape the debt and end poverty and caste oppression on countryside. The cities were uniformly unwelcoming to them. The state made no arrangements for affordable decent housing or to protect their rights as workers. Instead, it was consistently hostile to them, rendering illegal and demolishing their slum shanties or roadside vending. Still, millions of them survived and overcame, working hard to build, clean, maintain and sustain the cities and raise the lives of their families despite an unjust and uncaring state. The lockdown by design had nothing to offer them except to destroy overnight the lives they had resiliently built for themselves. After all, the safety, physical distancing and hand washing were impossible for them in their grimy, crowded shanties or rough streets. With their livelihoods borne out by the state's policy, in the ruins they were suddenly forced to endure the very hunger they escaped them that had moved to the city. Despite this, we in the middle classes readily demonstrated our support for the lockdown, cheeringly banging utensils or lighting lamps and candles as instructed. It is sobering to be mindful that most men and women tugging or cycling home in a dangerous journeys, dying on the railway tracks, or hunger and exhaustion on the railway food and water, are between 15 to 30 years old. But for the accident of their birth, they could instead have been in the high school or university studying on the line, working from the safety of their homes, fighting boredom with overdose of Netflix. There's a bias. This brazen class bias of state police did not trouble us at all. All government servants and most employees in the formal private sector were secure that they would be paid full salaries under this lockdown. The poor had to make to do slim financial handouts not more than 2 days' wages, an appeal by Prime Minister to employees to pay wages, and lining up for hours for cooked meals each day. Being thrust into massive deprivation and forced to survive the indignity of occasional charity seemed in the fitness of things for poor. It also seemed in the fitness of the things that we could quarantine in the comfort of our homes or the hide hotel rooms. The poor were forced into crowded dormitories with clogged bathrooms and inedible food which they regarded as jails. But nowhere was the cruelty of ruling classes on display more than in the treatment of migrant workers who wished to return home. For people stranded overseas, students in hostels, pilgrims, the states organized special flights and buses. For migrants, there were first a complete sealing of borders and cancellation of trains and buses, as million trains to trudge or cycle hundreds of kilometers with small children in tow, many dying in the accidents or exhaustion on the way. The government finally announced a small number of trains. Migrants had to pay until massive outrage forced a reluctant backtrack, but a complicated maze of bureaucratic requirements were thrust in place. One had to apply online and also get official clearances. Getting a seat was like a lottery, and information came online. Workers without smartphones fell back on a very contractor who had to let them down to negotiate them this tangle. Trains were often cancelled and rerouted, and there was no food and water along the way. People died of dehydration and hunger whilst traveling. Buses were the little better. Private enterprise and corruption thrived, and migrants were charged thousands even to travel on a bus rooftops. After a perilous journeys on the crowded bus and trucks packed in the way which could only spread the contagion exponentially, there were instances when several were drenched in unsafe disinfectants. Officials at many checkpoints demanded bribes, and workers sometimes paid more for the travel than air tickets. Migrants until recently provide for families in the villages had to ask them for money to be able to come home, and they mounted vast new debts. Governments and businesses did not help them because they did not care, and because they did not want them to move. They did not see them as human beings and the fullness of agency and humanity, but also the factor of production labor which should be obediently available on a call whenever they were able to restart the enterprise. When the Union government finally decided to restore flights, the minister said the health certificates before the travel and quarantine after were not practical, but for what was deemed not practical for a resourced or networked aid travelers was made mandatory for the workers without social capital. This should be the moment of civilization introspection. In coming months, as hunger spreads, jobs crumble, children are pulled out of school into labor, and poor people die without hospital beds and ventilators, we will acknowledge our collective culpability in social crime of the radical disposition of our people in all ultimately vain bid to keep just ourselves safe. We will also recognize the abject collapse of our moral center. This is regarding the moment of civilization introspection. There should be collective culpability in the social crime during this lockdown of the dispossession of India's working poor. This is a reflect of the present scenario, what was happening regarding the migrants and the rich and poor and the governments. And that's it for today. Thanks for joining me. Before I conclude, I request you to subscribe to my channel for more updates and videos like this. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.